I say it's kind of crazy that this is the first time we're talking about Queen, and they're kind of like this gigantic band in pop culture.
Yes. So. And we're going to talk about that, Josh. Okay. Yes, it is interesting. And I will say, I had to do the research for this with like the whole gamut because this is the only time we're covering them, and it's in a proper episode. So yeah. I am cutting out a ton of stuff because the research on this was just I just threw my hands up and I'm like, I'm done. I can't do any more. Yeah. But I will try to hit the main points. So this album comes in, do the numbers first on Best Ever Albums. It is number 24 in the 1970s. So if you guys were paying attention, tonight we did albums 28, 26, and 24. So this was almost just a back-to-back-to-back kind of a deal. But 24 in the 70s, number 4 in 1975, number 97 of all time, and it did make Rolling Stone's list as well. It comes in at number 128. I'm sorry, that was Stevie Wonder. This is number... Where'd it go?
It's gone.
It's gone. I'll clean it in a second. I think I just had my notes mixed up here for a second. Anyway, it's on the list. It's up there. So, okay, so the album was recorded between August and November of 1975, and it was released on November 21st, 1975. It is Queen's fourth studio album, so they've been in the game for a few years prior to this. At the time of its release, A Night at the Opera was considered the most expensive album ever recorded. And if you listen to it, it's not too hard to see why that might be. Yeah. It cost £40,000, which I did the numbers correctly here, which is £338,000 today. Which actually
they don't use pounds anymore. They use euros. Or are they back to pounds?
They're back to
They're about to be back to pounds again. Yep.
So
Brexit.
Okay. Yeah, which still doesn't seem like it's that much. That's probably like $500,000. That doesn't seem like a whole lot of money. It seems like bands might be spending more money than that to.
Yeah.
I'm sure Chinese Democracy cost more than $500,000 to make. But anyway,
an album we won't be talking about.
An album we will not be talking about for sure, and for good reason. So this was actually the title of this album was named after the Marx Brothers film of the same name. They were fans of that film and thought it would fit in well with this record. And this album includes a bunch of different genres, including things like ballads, different types of ballads, music hall and Dixieland, hard rock, prog rock, things of that nature.
Also, sorry, Matt, their following album, A Day at the Races, is also a Marx Brothers movie title.
Yes, that's correct. Yep, they like the Marx Brothers. The album did peak. It sold very well. It peaked at number 4 in the U.S. It did yield 2 singles, Bohemian Rhapsody and You're My Best Friend. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So a little history of the band Queen. They began in the late 1960s in East London. It was formed by guitarist Brian May, along with vocalist Tim Staffel, and the band was originally called Smile. Then when they were looking for a drummer, they put out an ad for a, quote, Ginger Baker / Mitch Mitchell type drummer.
Okay,
and
hard to find that.
Exactly. Can we get somebody that can drum just like these guys? Well, the ad was responded to by a young dental student by the name of Roger Taylor, who auditioned and got into the band, and he is playing on this record as well. So vocalist Tim Staffel attended art school and became friends with a young man named Freddie Bulsara, who also became a fan of the band Smile. And in 1970, Staffel actually quit over disagreements over the sound of the band and some frustration over the lack of success. So then Bulrosa joins as lead singer, and they recruit Roger Taylor's friend Mike Gross as a bassist. So it was Bulrosa who was his idea to change the name of the band to Queen, even though the other members weren't so, hip to that. But he still, they still decided to go with it. And he also changed his name to Mercury. So he becomes known as Freddie Mercury at this time. And the band meets a producer by the name of John Anthony, who did produce some albums by artists that we've covered already, including the first couple of Genesis albums, Trespass and Nursery Crime, as well as For Your Pleasure by Roxy Music, which we talked about recently. Anthony did not like the bassist, and that bassist eventually leaves, and they go through a couple of other bassists before they finally land on John Deacon, who joined in February of 1971, and this rounds out the classic lineup of Queen that would go on to actually remain the same lineup until the 90s, really. The band played their first gig in 1971, July 2nd, 1971, and Charisma Records offered them a deal, but they rejected it because that was the label that was that signed Genesis, and Queen felt that the priority was going to be too much on Genesis, so they didn't want to go there. So they ended up signing with a management company named Neptune Productions, which was a subsidiary of another company called Trident. And this ends up being a really important, aspect of their history, because this was one of those not good record deals. And so Queen goes on to record 3 different albums. Their first album was Queen, released in 1973. This is more of a heavy metal and prog rock type sound, hard rock sound. Queen 2 was released in 1974, and that's also considered their heaviest album that they've ever done. They do okay, not great. They're kind of, dabbling in a little bit of success. They do find more success with their third album, which is called Sheer Heart Attack, which was released in November of 74. So they're starting to see increased sales in the UK and the US. They're getting some international success, but they're still under this horrible contract, and they are not making any money. So this is one of those situations where when it comes to working on Night at the Opera, the band essentially saw this as a make it or break it type record. It kind of reminded me of Springsteen's Born to Run or Rush with 2112, other artists that have done albums that are like, okay, we're either going to make it here or it's not going to work out. And clearly it worked out, right? So they finally, after 9 months of fighting, they were able to negotiate themselves out of the Trident deal. And in order to do so, they paid £100,000, and they gave Trident 1% of their royalties from their next 6 albums, which I'm sure Trident was very they made a lot of money on, as we'll see, because they end up selling a ton of records. So they end up signing with EMI, who gets the rights to the rest of their back catalog. So they're producing those records, and then they needed to get a new manager. They considered going with Led Zeppelin's manager, Peter Grant, but again, like the Genesis thing, they didn't want to be a secondary priority. They knew Led Zeppelin was going to be the top priority for him, so they decided not to, and for some reason they decided to go with Elton John's manager. I don't know why they didn't think that Elton John would be a priority, but anyway. So this guy's name is John Reed, and he basically told the band, look, I know you guys are in all this debt. I will take care of the business. You guys just go make the best record that you can. And that's what they went into the studio trying to do. Recording took 4 months, and they recorded in 7 different studios. Multi-tracking was very much used throughout this record, particularly for the complex harmonies, which are all over the place here. 3 of the band members were really good singers. You had Brian May on guitar that had kind of a lower register. Freddie Mercury was in the middle register, and drummer Roger Taylor was at the higher register. And so they actually would not only sing in 3-part harmony, but the members for some of these tracks would each member would sing each part of the harmony, and then they would layer that over the other one. So at times you're hearing like 9 different voices because they all did all 3 parts. Oh, wow. There's a lot of stuff going. They were actually saying they used 24 tracks to record, so which was more than the 16 that they were used to. But even with some of these records, they had to put 2 different instruments or 2 different sounds on one track because they wanted to use more than 24 tracks and they weren't able to. Wow. And the overdubbing got to the point where they were doing it so much that they wore the tape so thin that they could kind of see through it. Which I'm like, how are you still able to play it? But they somehow were able to. So. They actually kind of reminded me a little bit of the Beatles in the sense that they did the 3-part harmony. They were all really good singers like Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison. They all wrote. So in this record, you have Mercury contributing to 5 songs. Brian May had 4, and then Deacon and Taylor each had 1 song on the album. The band did want Bohemian Rhapsody as a single, but the label was against it, felt that it was too long. It's almost 6 minutes long, but they ended up giving the song to a British DJ by the name of Kenny Everett, who played it 14 times over the span of 2 days, and it generated so much the fans were they loved it immediately, and there was such a great demand for it that EMI finally had to agree to release it as a single, which was a good move on their part. So this album has been praised for its musical variety. That's one of the things it's known for. It's the genres. It's all over the place that's going on here. And obviously there's a lot of elaborate and complex production and a lot of lush harmonies. So, and this is the album that sold. This was a big seller. It was a little bit critically. It wasn't like it was really revered like wholeheartedly. There was some mixed reviews, but it does sell very well. Bohemian Rhapsody became a huge hit. And You're My Best Friend was also a big hit as well. But this really laid the foundation for Queen to go on. They became a huge arena rock band, as John kind of mentioned earlier. They started playing gigs that, they played a gig in '76 in Hyde Park to over 150,000 fans. They played a concert in Rio de Janeiro in 1985. Over 300,000 people were watching that. They played Live Aid in '85 to a TV audience of an estimated 1.9 billion, and they were considered the highlight of the festival. Roger Waters from Pink Floyd had a quote saying, because he was there and he was walking around and everybody was just raving about Queen. He's like, "Did you see Queen? Did you hear Queen?" And actually, an industry poll in 2005 ranked their performance there as the best rock performance ever. So yeah, huge band. They did many albums after this, but this is the one. This is considered their best record, and it's the only one that we're covering, and it's the one that really saved them, because without this, they probably would have broken up and done other things. So very interesting record. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about this, and we're going to start with, I think we got to start with Josh. We're starting with Josh right now.
Okay.
Take it away.
So that Live Aid performance is on YouTube also, if you are interested. It's kind of singular, and they made it when they replicated it for the movie.
Right, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yep. Yeah. So this is so interesting. So my first memory of Queen is like Bohemian Rhapsody and Wayne's World, honestly. Like I don't think I've ever listened to one of their albums before. I just kind of know them through their like famous songs that are played everywhere, and like Fat Bottom Girls and stuff like that. And so it was very interesting to hear this album. And so the positives for me is this album does sound amazing, like production wise. There's like so much going on with the harmonies, and how they I don't know if this is because of the remaster or what, but the way that the harmonies shift in your ears too when you're listening on headphones, they kind of play with the sound stereo in interesting ways, in effective ways. I thought, Freddie Mercury's voice is so singular. It's just such a unique voice, and it's so powerful, and he has such a good, is it a falsetto? He can like sing in kind of like two different chords. It's just like an amazing voice, and then May is so good on the guitar too. That's like the Queen sound. And this may seem obvious to you guys, but listening to this record, I was like struck by how remarkable like My Chemical Romance owes to Queen. Like they are basically like almost like a harder version of Queen in some ways, and I never picked up on that before. So, and this album is like, I can totally see why Bohemian Rhapsody is like the most Queen song. It has all of their elements in like this mishmash, and this album is like the most Queen version of it. You have the harmonies, you have the different genres of music that are anchored by the like wailing big guitar of May at times, and I didn't know other people in the band sung before listening to this album.
Yeah,
so you
me
have
either, actually, Josh.
Yeah, you have I'm in Love with My Car by a different singer. I think
that's Roger Taylor, and that was his one song that he wrote for the album.
Okay, and then somebody else sings.
Brian May sings on 39.
Okay. Yep. Oh yeah, I wrote that down.
And he also sings on Good Company. That's his song as well.
Okay. So, I like Queen. Listening to this album, I don't know if I love their album. I think I'm not a fan of their like ragtime Dixieland style barbershop quartet thing that they do on some of these songs. Like Seaside Rendezvous is like a jaunty barbershop song, and parts of like Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon. They have, it highlights their voice and Freddie Mercury's voice a lot on a lot of those songs. Love of My Life, I thought that was kind of a weak song, but then they have other songs that are like amazing. Like I thought Death on Two Legs was just like a really good song that I had never heard before, and it starts out kind of fairly like dark and metally, and then it goes into like wailing guitars, and then Freddie's voice comes in, just like takes over, and it's just kind of like really, really catchy and like really amazing. And when their guitars mesh with their harmonies, I think that's when I like Queen the most. And I think that's kind of like the most successful thing. And that's obviously why I think Bohemian Rhapsody is so big, is because it's got those elements into it.
Yeah.
I thought other things, I liked 39 as like a country song, interesting and in a different genre. I thought, and I thought it's just I guess it's a strength of the band, that the fact that they can sing in all these different genres and like make that work for them, but it doesn't always work for me. I'd be interested to know who, I thought of this too, is like, who is Queen anyone's favorite band? Because I think everyone kind of...
Oh my God, yes.
You think so? Okay.
I'm going to talk about that in my review.
Okay.
But yes, to answer your question, for sure.
I feel like they're respected, and I feel like they are beloved in certain respects, but I don't know if like their artistry as a whole... I have no frame of reference, so maybe if John's going to correct me on that, but it's... And something like in the Prophet song too, which is almost like an a cappella song for most of it, but then you have like almost like Iron Maiden level of metal and harmonies later on in the song. So they are just so kind of singular and unique and such a mishmash, and it doesn't always work for me, but when it hits, it like hits really, really good for me. So it's it was like it was kind of one of the more interesting listens that I've had on the show recently, listening to this.
So I'm going to invert my review of Stevie Wonder's album, where I started with the two things I didn't like and then went into all the things I liked. And I'm going to start here with the couple things I liked and then go into like my general take. Death on Two Legs, if it's not the best Queen song, it's in the top 3. It's kind of the best synthesis of what Queen kind of, I guess, is for me. To me, Brian May in Queen is one thing. He is a very good guitar player, right? And then Death on Two Legs has all of the other things I think of with Queen, like the layered harmonies, the vamping by Freddie Mercury and stuff like that. But it's in a way that is almost the most palatable form to me of it. And you can clearly see how they would perform that at a show. I think I even put that up on the Twitter account and stuff, and it kind of plays into all the strengths of the band right there. Sweet Lady is also a very good song on this. It's riffy. It's basically a Brian May song. It's like Queen is doing it, but it's basically just Brian May playing guitar, would be how I describe that song. Josh had mentioned 39, which is interesting. That to me is like the band, which is so interesting to hear Queen like channel the band, right? Like in a song. So that, and I went into another thing that, I mean, Brian May is a very good guitar player. He's riffy. He is a template for a lot of like heavy metal players later, like the big glowing heavy metal players. And I always appreciate that. He can go, up and play the solos, but also play very, I guess, tasteful is the term, right? And tight when he needs to, so he can do the pop songs there. I won't say I've never gotten Queen, because I understand what people who love Queen get. And yes, I know lots of people whose favorite band is Queen. If you've ever met anyone who resides in the world of drama, right? Like drama departments and stuff. Their favorite band is Queen. Often, if you listen to people who like emo music, right? When they go back to where it comes from, you mentioned My Chemical Romance, right? You know what I mean? Yes. When you talk to lots of people who were closeted in the 70s and 80s, Queen is their favorite band. Yes, I actually think of them as one of the bands that has the most people who describe them as their favorite band. I totally get what the appeal for them is. I'm just not their target audience. Like Freddie Mercury's like over the top vamping kind of. Just I can appreciate like a lead singer who can be cheesy or over the top. It just doesn't work for me often. I never find heart in Queen songs, which is funny because I was reminded of that famous review in Rolling Stone where the one critic said that like Queen's the first fastest rock band, and obviously that's over the top. And I know critics hate Queen, and I while I also understand why people love Queen and totally get it, I also understand why rock critics hate Queen, and I get that too, you know. And so like I feel that like they're a little bit of everything to everybody depending on where, you know, what you're looking for out of a band. To me, I don't feel any connection to like Queen's lyrics or soundscape to some degree. I just, the genres they're picking a lot of times, with the exception of Brian May's guitars, which I can get into, I get taken out of it a lot because I almost feel their detached performance art at sometimes. And so they share a little bit of like prog rock for me that way, that sometimes it's like art and noise for the sake of art and noise, you know, without any like human emotion for me that's connected to it. This is me speaking, right? And so a lot of their songs become gimmicky or schlocky or, as you said, jaunty, right? Or kind of like Rocky Horror Picture Show, like campy kind. And so there's a lot of that on this. Songs like I don't know if there's a big band that has more songs that I outwardly dislike than Queen. Like it's just like songs, like there are songs that are like I'm in love with my car here and Seaside Rendezvous. I don't just dislike those songs, like I actively kind of hate those songs. And I think that's a struggle for me with Queen. They almost remind me a little bit of Springsteen when he's at his worst, in that they can be big, over the top, gimmicky, and stuff. Now, in a different way, don't get me wrong, but I just have to lay my biases out. I can appreciate that this album, like Josh said, produced and sounds like $1 million. I can also appreciate that they're doing interesting things with the double track. Well, I shouldn't say double tracking, like triple tracking.
Yeah,
like
it's a
bazillion
lot.
tracking, which you can hear because it's almost overlayered, and once again gets sort of that synthetic feel to me that takes me out of it a little bit. I can appreciate how, and unpopular opinion alert, so please, if you're a Queen fan, tune out, because I'm going to give an unpopular opinion right now. I can appreciate that Freddie Mercury is a wonderful performer. I just would have no interest in being at his performance because the songs don't do enough for me. They really do. Like if somebody's performing their heart out, but in songs I don't want to hear, like and once again, that's a little bit of the Springsteen complex for me. It's wonderful performer, but if they're performing songs I don't want to hear, it's, you know, it's not the same for me.
And
that's the struggle for me.
I was gonna say, I wonder. I would think seeing Freddie Mercury might elevate some of these songs. I think his performance probably adds something to it, but I've only seen that Live Aid performance. So I don't know.
It doesn't for me.
Yeah.
I do think that's the case for a lot of people, and I think a lot of the legacy of Queen nowadays is the live performance, right? Because it's the first thing you think of with Queen is Freddie Mercury's live performances for most people. It's funny because the first thing I always think of is Brian May's guitar is what I always think of in Queen first, and the genre shifting and stuff like that. And the fact that a weird, like over the top band beloved by, you know, theater kids is also the same band that wrote We Will Rock You and Another One Bites the Dust, which is such a bizarre dual like legacy, like stadium rock guy and then also like, you know, beloved band for like the, you know, the outcast trying to find their way. Freddie Mercury's persona is also really interesting, that he's this like very flamboyant, over the top person who also tries to be like hyper aggressive at times, which is always a weird mix for me as well. Like,
well, that's like such a like a camp, like almost intentional.
And I was gonna say, it's
like
and it is, and that's the thing. It's the thing with Queen. You never know is when are they being tongue in cheek, and when are they the band that played apartheid South Africa because it made them a lot of money. And it's kind of like the same band that's campy and says I'm in for it and kind of out of it is the same band that made a cold-blooded decision to go play South Africa in a time when you just didn't do that, right? And basically made no apologies about it and said, like, yeah, we did it because they paid us a shit ton of money. So what are you going to do about it? And that's kind of my thing with Queen. Like, if I could just take them as tongue-in-cheek, right, then I would. But I don't think they're always tongue-in-cheek. I think there's a lot of deliberateness to what they are. And as a result, it takes away a little bit of the laughing, you know what I mean, you can do and stuff like that, and makes them kind of dead serious with their camp, which in turn makes their camp less appealing for me. So that'll be the end of my take right there. There's a lot of, much like in the other albums we did tonight, right? There's a lot of genre shifting, and I'm not going to take away from it. If you're going to listen to a Queen album, I would say Sheer Attack, I think, is probably the one that has more songs that I like on it. And might be, for those that are Queen apprehensive like myself, a better place to come in because it's a little bit more guitar and a little less camp. But I mean, you're never going to get away from camp too much with Queen. So yeah, I can't recommend this one. I'm not a big fan of this one, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of go in and out with Queen because I'm not like a huge Queen fan myself, but they do have a number of songs that when I hear them, I'm like, I kind of like that, you know? So there are definitely a lot of the things that you're saying here, that the campiness is there. And, you know, I see what you're saying, like, are they being serious? Are they joking around? It's kind of hard to kind of pigeonhole them, you know, them down to see exactly what they're about. This album was very interesting just listening to this week because I think I knew Bohemian Rhapsody, and I thought that was it until You're My Best Friend came on, and I'm like, holy freaking crap, this song is all over the place on that, was it AT&T commercial or something? Like, as soon as I heard that Wurlitzer piano, I was like, oh, and I hated that song because it's one of those things it suffers from the what do you call it, who did Like a Rock, John? That was we were
Bob
talking
Seger.
about that. Bob Seger. It's the Bob Seger thing where this has been so overplayed on TV and commercials that when I hear it, I can't separate the song from the commercial, and it's probably got a very, it's very similar sound to it sounds like a McCartney type of like melodic, bouncy kind of goofy song that I would maybe like if I wasn't just hearing it all the time. So
I was about to say, I'm kind of shocked you don't like that song because it's right up your wheelhouse.
And that's what I'm saying. My point is that the commercial has killed that for me because my brain automatically goes to commercial, and it totally is like, and I never really liked it in the commercial. So, and I didn't know it was Queen either. So I was like, wow, it was a couple of.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, I didn't know.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
So I was very surprised by that in many ways. So, so that's probably my least favorite song of this record, actually, as it turns out. But, so listening to the beginning, I was very confused. What are they doing, right? Where is this going? It's almost like the 10cc record where they're just not nearly as bad, though, because at least they would stay within the song. Like 10cc put like 12 songs in one 3-minute long song, right? This was just, they would kind of stay in their lane usually within one song for the most part. There's a little prog elements to it here and there, but the more I listened to it, the more I was able to piece out each of the songs, and then I learned about, okay, so-and-so wrote this song, and that's where, like, some of them I didn't even know where one song began and one song ended, because they do kind of flow in together, right? So I was having trouble figuring out, wait, is this the end of the song or is this the beginning of the song? You know,
they all write, correct? All four of them?
They do,
Josh?
yes.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I thought so.
Yep, and actually, the two songs that we picked, the bass player Deacon wrote You're My Best Friend, and Taylor wrote I'm in Love with My Car. And all the rest of the songs are Mercury and May songs. I disagree with John. I really liked I'm in Love with My Car when I first really kind of listened to it. I like the
makes sense.
I like the chorus of that. It's just it's a cool song. I like I like the vocals there, and that's the other thing. I like the switching up of the vocals. It makes it a little bit interesting too, the different people singing. But I really like that song, and I really loved 39. That was a big surprise for me on this. Yes, I see the band there, what you're talking about, John. I was getting, man, this sounds like an Irish folk song, like I'm expecting this this is like an old-timey, folk, traditional folk or British folk song, something like that. And it's really interesting because Brian May wrote that, and the lyrics are about Brian May, he's a physicist, and he's all into he's got like a PhD.
Space.
Yeah. But yeah, so a bunch of guys go to space for a year, they come back, and Einstein's theory of relativity pans out, and everybody 100 years has passed on Earth, and only a year has passed for these guys. So they're talking about like, wow, everybody's gone and dead, but it doesn't sound like a space song at all. It's like the weirdest juxtaposition there, you know. The Lazy Sunday Afternoon, The Secret Rendezvous, what is it? Good Company. These are all kind of that Dixieland kind of, you know, old school, really old school songs, like even before our grandparents types, like stuff that we're doing like in the 20s and stuff, you know. But like, it's certainly not my favorite thing. I definitely don't want to listen to an entire album of it. I didn't mind it as much as it went on. I will say I was impressed when I learned on Secret Rendezvous, when they do that breakdown of all the horns and stuff like that. Those aren't horns. Those are vocals. That's Roger Taylor doing the brass horns, and Freddie Mercury doing like the woodwind. So if you listen to that, those are all them mimicking the sounds of horns, and they do a really freaking good job of it. So I was just very impressed by that. I thought that was an interesting, and the tap dancing was their fingers, they had thimbles on their fingers, and they were just tapping them on the on the board. So I thought that was interesting. So Prophet Song I liked a lot. I thought that had a really cool guitar riff, and it had that. I probably went a little too long with the vocal part in the middle. They kind of did the row, row, row your boat thing, where they would start a vocal and then they would start it, and so they had three different parts like repeating themselves, which was okay. It was kind of cool, but a little bit long. But I thought the riff there was cool. And I disagree with Josh. I think Love of My Life is a beautiful song. I think that's a very, very pretty song. And I kind of found myself going, man, that sounds a little bit like Bohemian Rhapsody there. There's a couple of chord progressions
the way he
there.
sings too is a little bit like that.
Yes, there's very similar elements, and I was thinking I was going to read a little bit more about that in the research, but it didn't really come up. So it's similar to that. And then Bohemian Rhapsody is just like is a massive song, and I didn't realize how big it was, but it's the third best-selling single in UK history. It's behind like the Redux Candle in the Wind that Elton John did. What is it? And Do They Know It's Christmas by Band-Aid. That's number 2. Yeah. But Bohemian Rhapsody is number 3. So ahead of all the Beatles songs and all that. So just a massive song. That song took 3 weeks to record. They, at one point, what they say? They would do the vocals for 10 to 12 hours a day. And there were 180 separate overdubs. And Brian Wilson actually gave an interview at the time saying he praised the song as the most competitive thing that's come along in ages. So he was very impressed by that. But, and so it became a massive hit. And also the video, the promo film that they did for it, they filmed that shortly after the recording of the album. And that really set the template for what MTV would become. It was a very influential video that a lot of people went back to and said, when we do videos, Queen, let's kind of try to do some of the stuff that Queen was doing. So, and then the other stat with that, there's so many groundbreaking things with this. But then in 2018, it was the most streamed song from the 20th century. So people love that freaking song. So, and I still do. I still really like it. So, I overall like this album. I liked it more the more I listened to it. There's definitely some throwaway elements, in here for me. But once I kind of got what the album was doing, it didn't bother me as much. I felt okay with more of the Dixieland stuff, very interesting record. I think I liked it overall, but didn't love it, but I think I did like it a lot.
The other kind of thing I noticed is kind of how inane their lyrics are, and
their lyrics are awful.
Yeah,
it's one of the things about Queen is you got this incredible voice, and they never sing about anything.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they have a song called "I'm in Love with My Car," and then you're like, wait, what is this song really about?
It's about the car. No,
yeah, it's literally about him writing about a car.
The roadie that loved his car. That was what he wrote it about.
That kind of comes up over and over again throughout their songs, to the point, and I don't always pick up on the lyrics, but they're like, for example, it would be like, let's write a song about dogs, and then like really write a song about dogs or something.
I'm in love with my dog.
So let's go Queen songs you don't know from this album, right? Fat Bottom Girls, Another One Bites the Dust,
right.
We Will Rock You, Killer
Radio
Queen,
Gaga.
Radio Gaga. Tell me what those songs are about, right? Nothing. And I don't mean to be mean, but like that's a part of why I always say Queen is like, they don't connect with me, right? Because they're like I said, performance art, but I never really kind of get what what I'm supposed to get from it. And I think some of it is I'm not supposed to get anything else from it. I'm just supposed to enjoy the show and the singular personality of Freddie Mercury, which is cool, but it ain't doing it for me.
Well, it's interesting that you say that Death on Two Legs is one of maybe your favorite song on the record, because that's actually about something. He wrote that for the manager, Norman Sheffield from Trident, who like screwed him over of all of his money. So that was a very angry song that Mercury wrote.
Because it's the one song with emotion. Like if you, it's like, to me, it's the song that, like I said, it's the one song where you feel like you're getting another layer. You know, it really is. It's the one song I did seek out the live performance, and because I'm like, ooh, I want to see what this looks like on stage with their famous stage act. You know, and the bicycle song, right? There's another one that's exactly about and it's like it just that's like Queen's deal. You know, it's like you kind of. You know, you watch Queen because Freddie walks away, and you know that's what it is for me. I think that's why I struggle to connect, because to me I need some sort of either emotional connection, or I need lyrical connection, or and it just, that's the thing I struggle with sometimes, that you have this guy with this incredible voice and it's just singing nothing about a bicycle and fat bottom girls, and you're just like, God, if you gave him you don't feel the same way about Zeppelin, right? Like that voice gets, because he may be singing about sex and Norse mythology and stuff, but it doesn't feel like totally detached from a feeling.
He does a couple of them. Love of My Life is obviously about it's a love song about, actually I think that was about his, I don't know if it was his wife, but his girlfriend. He had a female love interest. That's who that was about. And he wrote Death on Two Legs, so that he can do it. But you're right, John. It's and it's not just him. It's May. It's Taylor wrote I'm in Love with My Car.
It's all
actually the Deacon song was about that was about his wife. The You're My Best Friend, but it's still not a whole lot
even
there.
The country space song about time travel and physics, like that's not really, it's just like a weird like dichotomy between.
I just love that song because I love the music for that. I was just so surprised that they did a song like that, and I think that that's just what it comes down for me, is I'm able to the lyrics here are to the point for me where it's taking away from the music and just the stuff that's happening. And this is one of those albums that I had to listen to several times before I started to go, okay, I think I like this, because initially I was like, what is going on? Like I was just utterly confused.
Could I give you one other interesting thing about Queen? Queen, is such a weird thing to me, because on one hand, I think of Queen as absolutely a pop band, not even like a rock band. But then they've got Brian May's guitar, which is undeniably rock guitar. So you have this weird juxtaposition of a band that in all other ways is a pop band, except that they have this guy with these big guitars, that alone is what makes them a rock band. And so I don't really know how to classify Queen. It would be like if you took Iron Maiden and only one guy played the guitar of the Triple Guitar Attack, and then there were no real big drums or bass. They were there, but not out in front to the point where you wouldn't think of them as just a pop accompaniment. And then you just had, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's the pieces that are missing are the part that's why I never know what to define Queen as. To me, they're a pop band, but.
Well, they have several genres in Wikipedia, including avant pop, much like this is a similar genre as Stevie Wonder.
Okay.
So, but along with prog rock, pop, heavy metal, and hard rock is in avant pop.
Well, and if we go with avant as across the board, right? That's kind of what avant means, right? And it does eclectically jump. All of the albums this week do, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Although there ain't nothing pop about, Led Zeppelin most of the time. So
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, any other thoughts before I close it out? John, thumbs down from John. Josh, where were you?
I'm like kind of thumbs in the middle. Some of the stuff I really like, some of it I don't.
Yeah, I think I'm thumbs up. I think the strong stuff for me is enough in musically. I was just surprised, and I think I still love Bohemian Rhapsody. I know it's a very and I did post the Wayne's World clip on Twitter, Josh. So I was like, that's how I first heard that. I was like, what is this song? And that song got a huge it hit the top, the singles chart again in 1992 when Wayne's World came out. So I've always liked that song too. So Queen goes on. They did like 11 total albums, I think, after this. So they have a very, a pretty extensive catalog. But as many people know, Freddie Mercury was diagnosed as HIV positive in 1987. He didn't go public with it, though. He told his band members and some close friends, but they did continue to work on albums. But he did finally confirm a diagnosis given from his deathbed, and 24 hours later he died from bronchial pneumonia, and this was in November of 1991. There was a tribute concert that was performed on April 22nd, 1992, to a television audience of another astounding number of an estimated 1.2 billion, and included performers such as Def Leppard, Robert Plant, Tony Iommi, I always call him Tommy for some reason, Roger Daltrey, Guns N' Roses, Elton John, David Bowie, George Michael, Annie Lennox, Seal, Extreme, and Metallica, who all performed various Queen songs, along with the remaining 3 Queen members. They would continue to perform, but bassist Deacon retired from the band in 1997, and then in 2004 they toured with Paul Rodgers, who was the former lead singer of Bad Company, and in April of 2011 they performed on American Idol with Adam Lambert, and later took him on as lead singer for their shows, and I think he's still touring with them, and and being the lead singer for Queen. And they even released a live album in 2020. They wanted to do different material, but I guess COVID prevented that from happening. So they did, release an album in 2020. They've been massive. They've been one of the biggest selling artists of all time. They've got 18 number one albums, 18 number one singles. They've sold an estimated between 170 and 300 million albums worldwide. I don't know how you get that discrepancy, but they've sold a ton of records, suffice to say, including 34.5 million albums in the U.S. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2001, and it's the only group in which every member has composed more than one chart-topping single. And all 4 members were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2003. Their greatest hits album, their first greatest hits album, is easily the best-selling record ever in the UK.
Wow.
So, and their Greatest Hits Volume 2 is the 13th highest selling album ever in the UK. So people love them some Queen, Josh, to answer your question. So very big band.
I thought Elton John was big. I guess Queen's bigger.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like sales-wise, yes, for sure. But yeah. Very interesting and they are their own thing. And I would just say too, I agree with John. Brian. The other thing with Brian May, not just his guitar playing, but the tone. It's like you hear Brian May play, know it's him. And I would say this, and you hear Freddie Mercury sing, and it's him. So they do have a very distinct sound.
Absolutely.